Hello and welcome to Get Started. Welcome back. I'm Merlin, and in this video we're going to take our Space Marines to the next level with some advanced techniques. If you haven't already, go back and watch episode 1 part 2 painting to learn how to paint Crimson Fists up to battle ready, and then do this for your captain. Also, don't forget, I've put the Storm Shield arm on a separate sub-assembly holder. I've also done the same for the Power Sword arm to make reaching all that detail a lot easier. Right, if you're ready, I'll see you at the paint desk. Here we have our Space Marine Captain battle ready and ready for our next colours. Before we begin though, we've got some new colours to add to our Space Marine. First we've got Zandy Dust. This is going to go on the skeleton, on the shield. And second, we've got Runelord Brass. This will go on any decorative icons. I'll show you all on the shield. So this is our first colour, Zandy Dust. Just give your paint a good shake. We'll use our medium layer brush as we're looking at painting quite a bit of fine detail. Gather some paint on our palette, like so. Thin it down with a touch of water, quite a bit, as it's a base paint. You might need 2 to 3 brushfuls to get a good smooth mixture. But make sure we're not overloaded. And now we can apply this to the skeleton. There's lots of other small details on the skeleton, but just apply this Zandy Dust all over first, and we can paint those afterwards. Just try not to get any of the paint on the areas you've completed, such as the back of the shield and the parchment here. There we go, we've got a good layer of Zandy Dust down on our skeleton now, and as you can see, it really helps split it apart from the parchment detail. So our next colour is Runelord Brass, and we're going to put this on a lot of the gold details. So I'll show you on the shield here. So give our paint a good shake, and again we're using our medium layer brush for this. Just a touch of water for metallic paints, you don't need too much to water them down. Make sure we got a good tip on our brush. And on the shield here, the areas we're looking to pick out are the edging on the hourglass, the halo on his back, moving on to the sword arm, we've now got the crossguard here to pick out, and the pommel on the end of the hilt. And on our captain himself, we've got decorative icons here, the Crux Indomitus, a little honor cartouche here, skulls, the trim here on his knee pad, I'll pick that out in Runelord Brass, and also the iron halo on his back. Another skull there on the hip guard to get. Decorative detail here on his holster and his power plant. Just work your way around the model and carefully fill in all these brass areas with the Runelord Brass. Okie dokie, with those areas painted and any mistakes touched up, we're ready to wash those with a shade of Nuln Oil just as we would do with the whole model. So we'll use our medium shade brush for this. Just gather a puddle of the non oil on our palette like so. Now we want to wash this all over the skeleton. As you can see, I've picked out the bands holding into the shield in Mournfang Brown, and the power cable attachment nodes with Lead Belcher. So you want to put this Nuln Oil just over the silver, the Mournfang Brown, and of course any areas that you've touched up, like I have. I've got a few mistakes behind the shield, behind the skeleton there. And leave that for about 20 minutes to fully dry. And we're ready to begin our next stages. Okay, with our washes now dried, or close to, we're ready to begin our next stage. The first technique we're going to look at is called relayering. This is a technique where we first define the areas with a highlight and then block them in with the original base layer, leaving the darker colours in the recesses. The area we'll focus on is the robes. So for that, we're going to need Rakarth Flesh. So as usual, give your paints a real good shape. And again, we'll need our medium layer brush. So yeah, the Rakarth Flesh prepared on our palette like so. Touch of water to help thin it down. A little more, I think. That would do. We want to make it sure it's fairly runny, so we want about 4 brushes of water to 1 brush of paint. So make sure we got a nice tip on our brush. And then on our model, as I said, the areas we're going to look at are the robes here. So first we want to highlight the edgings like so. And then, using our thin down mix, we want to get in as close to the recess as we can, and then drag our paint outwards towards the edge we've already defined. Some areas where the material's flat, we can just relayer simply straight over, but for the deeper recessed areas we need to drag the paint from the centre out towards the edge. Once our first layer is dried, we want to go over it with a second layer, just so that we can get a stronger transition from light to dark. Other areas we want to look at is relayering the hair. This is a much simpler technique by just applying the thin down Rakarth Flesh to the smooth areas, leaving the darker colours right in the recesses. And as you can see, that relayering has really helped redefine those flat areas with still plenty of shading in the recesses. If you've over applied your paint, just go back with a little bit of Nuln Oil and drop it into the very recesses, much like I've done on the back tabard here. The next area we want to relayer is the flesh. While the Crimson Fists are fairly dark skinned compared to most Space Marines, we still want to have a nice rosy peachiness to their flesh. So we'll just relayer on the highest areas with some Bugman's Glow. Thin your paint a little more than normal. And on our model, we want to focus it to the raised areas, bridge of the nose, the eyebrow, along the hairline like so. Just leaving that darkened Bugman's Glow in the recesses. There we go, I think that'll do. Okie dokie, with all our relayering done, we're now ready to move on to the next technique we're going to learn. And that technique is called edge highlighting. And, like the name suggests, this is a technique that involves picking out the sharper edges with a brighter colour than the base colour. So first we'll focus on the armour, and the paint we'll need is a Laytock blue. This is a nice dusky blue that will look good on top of the contour blue we painted earlier. And with this being a layer paint, it'll be slightly thinner than the base colours we've used before, so we won't need so much water to thin it down. But we'll still want our palette just so we can control how much of the paint we're applying to our miniature. Want to roll our brush back to a nice thin point. Might be a good idea to also wash your brush off as well. Dry it off on your tissue, and then we can recollect the amount of paint on our brush. We don't need too much. That sort of amount will be just fine. Onto our captain. And the areas we're going to pick out are all his armour panels. So the first bit we'll pick out here is the tilt shield. So we can just use the edge of our brush, gently drag along, and as you can see the Laytock blue is picking out just on that upper ridge. So do that all the way around the tilt shield like so. Just using the edge of your brush so you've got nice control. It's also handy to paint towards you, so re-angle your model and drag the brush towards you like so. We'll do this all over the armour. There are some areas, just like below the knee pad there, where we can't get to with the edge of our brush. So you just want to get a thin tip to your brush and you want to trace along the edge of the armour like so. As you can see, that gives us a nice highlight there. So now all we've got to do is continue picking out all the edges on our armour with the Laytock blue. Okay, here's a Merlin top tip that I learned from another expert painter. As you can see here on the shoulder pad, I've gone a little too chunky with that highlight. So the easiest way to fix that is to go back to our base layer, in this case contour blue. So we'll get some contour blue onto our palette and thin down in the usual way. What we're going to do is simply reaffirm that base layer. So what I'll do is start away out from the edging, then gently feather our brush backwards and forwards until we thin down that line to about that sort of point. where it looks like we've got a good thin line of a Laytock blue around our shoulder pad. And after the paint has dried, you can apply a light shading with non-oil just to bring it back down to that nice dark blue the rest of the armour is. So do this anywhere around your model that you've made a few mistakes, just to help tidy up those edges and make it all look a little bit neater. While I've got the shield out, this is a perfect piece to show you our next colour. So to highlight all the red armour, we're going to use Evil Sun's Scarlet. This is a nice bright red, which will help the armour stand out against the other red areas like the purity seals, which we'll paint next. So again, this is the same method as last time with the blue armour. We're going to get some of the Evil Sun Scarlet on our palette, like so. Thin it down with some water. A little bit more. Give our brush a good wash off. And we're ready to apply this to our model. So we'll gather up a little amount of the Evil Sun Scarlet. And we're just going to pick out all the red armour. So the trim on the shield here, just use the edge of your brush, like so. Pick out these fingers on his gauntlet. As our Crimson Fist captain is a veteran, he has his left and right gauntlet painted in red. So don't forget to do the power sword arm hand as well. Areas like down here, we want to angle it so that we're, again, brushing towards ourselves, but also so that we can keep the brush away from all the areas that we've already painted. Being careful of that parchment and the skeleton. So then just continue doing this around the entire model. And now we're ready to move on to our next colour. Sticking with our shield, our next colour is Wazdaka Red. This is a nice rosy red, almost pinky red. And we're going to use this on all our purity seals. This helps them stand out against areas such as the red trim. So we'll just get some Wazdaka Red on our palette, thinned a couple of brushfuls of water, and onto our shield. As I said, we're going to pick out the purity seals, so just gently touch your brush to the edges, leaving the corn red in the recesses. Also pick out any skulls embossed. This one down here is a nice easy one to pick out. Just catch the raised details of the Wazdaka Red, like so. Do that around the entirety of your model, and we'll be back for the next colour. Next, pick out any of your black areas with an edge highlight of Dawnstone. So on my captain, the only areas I've actually picked out with Dawnstone is the hourglass being held by the skeleton. So we just want a really tiny point on our brush, very little Dawnstone, and onto our model. Just want to pick out the edge here where the light will catch. Next we're going to edge highlight all our leather details, and we're actually going to go back to Mornfang Brown for this. So we'll get some of the Mournfang brown onto our palette. The good thing about having Mournfang brown as the base layer, the highlight will be nice and subtle, but it gives an extra layer of detail because we've got the wash down as well. So we'll just pick out the edges of our leather. Next we want Dawnstone, and this is going to be picking out a highlight on all our areas of cloth. Mainly the tabard, as we want to try and give it a slight different finish to parchment. So we'll just prepare our paint as usual, getting some Dawnstone on our palette, watering down with a touch of water. Get our brush to a nice point. And I'll show you on the back tabard here. So we just want to get a nice broad highlight there on the edges and any raised detail. If you make any mistakes, just touch up with some Rakarth flesh before you move on to your next colours. Now we have a nice edge highlight to our tabards, and hopefully once we apply an edge highlight to our parchment, it'll make it stand out a little bit different. Onto our parchment and hair, and the colour we'll need is Flayed-on Flesh. So this will work as a nice edge highlight to all our parchment. And there's a nice bright bony colour, but not too bony. So that makes it look more a little like tanned skin. Or flayed skin, should I say. So I can show you on the captain here, we just want to edge highlight all these bits of parchment. Like so. Angle your model as needed. You might also want to brace your elbows on the flat surface. When it comes to the painting the hair, we'll get the edge of the hair like so. Then you want to apply gentle flakes to try and give a bit of definition to the hair. Okay, the only areas we've got left to highlight now are all the metals. The first colour we'll need is Ironbreaker. This is going to go over any of the silver areas. So let's get some of the Ironbreaker onto our palette. You won't need too much water with this, as it's a really nice thin translucent paint. But I do suggest giving your brush a good clean off before loading up. And onto our model. So we'll pick out, he's Aquila here. Just want to highlight all the raised edges, like so. And the skull there as well. Pick out the edges of his belt buckle. We've also got the vents on his backpack here. Just pick them out with the Ironbreaker. Like so. And of course we've got his pistol poking out there. And the metal cap on his holster. And finally we can pick out all the bronze details with a layer of canoptic alloy. This is a nice bronze that will go on top of the Runelord brass. And give it a nice highlight. So I've got some on my palette prepared. And we're going to pick out bronze areas such as the knee pad here. Icon here, just drag your brush along the raised edges. Even that Runelord brass in the details. In the recesses. And of course the main thing we've got to pick out is his iron halo here. You want to really catch the uppermost areas here, and of course the tops of the spikes. And of course tidy up with any of the base layers if you make any mistakes like I've just done. There we go, with those final layers done, any touch-ups made, all what's left to do is to clip your arms off the stands and push them onto our model. You may need to clean up the areas where the components attach, just so that you can apply some glue. But that is everything for our captain for the moment. We will return to him in a later video with some extra detail. But until then, I think it's time for him to face the swarm. There we go. With those edge highlighting done, our captain will stand out on the battlefield. In later videos, we'll learn new methods of highlighting, so we can always come back to our captain at a later date. Also, don't forget to apply these methods to your other models in your Space Marine collection if you want to bring them up to the same level as your captain. I hope you found these tips helpful. As a final tip, don't forget to take your time, especially with those edge highlighting. If you make any mistakes, touch up with your base coats, and don't forget to always clean your water after using metallic paints. Right, it's time to learn the ins and outs of close combat as we face the swarm. I've been Merlin, this has been Get Started, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.